First of all, I love this idea of watching this movie because it shows you the live audience reaction that you get as an actor and how that feeds into your performance. So the performance can change every single night.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, if you could hypothetically bring any one of your films to the stage to get that live audience feeling that you have not watched the stage before, which one would you want to do for 190 shows?
It's really good for 190 shows. So you had to add that to it, didn't you? I don't know. That's a very good question. There are LA Confidential, I'll just say.
Can I ask why?
Because I loved that movie. I loved that part. I loved the examination of that world, and I just thought it was such a cool movie. It was such an amazing experience, and all those actors that people at that time didn't really know, Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce and me. I thought it was just really well done. I love that movie.
How different would your character be had you done it on stage? Do you think it would change each night?
Yeah, it would change because, people who sort of don't quite understand, like they think theater's always the same. You're like always saying the same lines. I try to make this analogy, which I think most people can sort of get around their head. It's like going out and playing 8 nights of tennis.
Yeah.
It's the same rules, but it's a different game every time you're on that court. And you're working on a different part of your game. And your partner's working on a different part of their game. And then you add to that the act of being watched. It's one thing if you go to a park with a friend of yours and the two of you are playing tennis together. But if you go to a club and there's like 15 people with champagne and sandwiches watching you play, that's a totally different kind of game. So it is this, that's why I called it Now, because it's alive. It's at this moment, and it's never the same. It is. I always make this comparison that no matter how good an actor might be in a movie, they'll never be any better. It's frozen.
Interesting.
But in the theater, I can be better tomorrow night than I was tonight. I can be better in 2 weeks. And the growth that you go through from rehearsal, first preview, opening night, to 12 weeks later, in this case to months later, is a remarkable journey. And it's always changing.
It's almost as if you're building another arc for the character over 198 shows.
Absolutely, and you have to keep it fresh, and also the audiences are fresh every night. And of course, in the case of this play, the other great thing that was ultimately ended up being very helpful for House of Cards is that this is where direct address was created. I mean, for people who don't know, Francis Underwood is based on Richard III. Michael Dobbs wrote the original book and the original series. So that breaking of the fourth wall, I know you might think Ferris Bueller invented that, but he didn't. It was Richard III. So that experience of going around the world and being able to break that fourth wall and look directly into audiences' eyes so helped me when I then, a month after we finished this play, started shooting the first season on House of Cards.
Now, you mentioned House of Cards because Sam Mendes actually has a line in the movie where he says theater is House of Cards. It's like House of Cards. Can you explain what he means by that?
Well, he means that we were talking, I think, at that moment about this thing that we do on stage when we're not supposed to laugh. It's called corpsing, and basically it means you're dead. Like you're dead because someone is making you laugh, and you're laughing in front of the audience, and you're like, you can't stop laughing, and so you have to get off stage as quickly as you can.
And one guy incorporated
constantly incorporated that into his character. So Sam, I think, was talking about the fact that at any given moment, the whole thing can collapse. Judi Dench is famous almost for stopping shows because she has been laughing so hard she cannot continue. And particularly her and Maggie Smith, when they're together on stage, are notorious for giggling in hysterics. So I think that's what Sam was referring to, is that it's just so easy because you're walking this tightrope, and it can just so easily collapse into absolute giggles of laughter.
Now, you have a brilliant line in this particular film that I love, where you say that you let the play take you. It's a remarkable thing you say, and how it just kind of takes over your body and you become the character. Is that capable? Are you able to do that in a movie when you're so you can't do that at all? You can't let a movie
because
take
I'll
you.
tell you why. By that, what I mean by that is you start a play, and out of 24 scenes in this play, in this production of this play, Richard was in 22 of them. So it's almost like you get on a horse and it just goes. And in film and television, you work in 2 or 3 minute little bits, and you do 12 different versions of those little bits, and then they take it away and they cut it all together and make it look like it actually happened in the 2 hours or however long a film or a television program is. it's very unorganic. So no, I've never been taken when I've been shooting a film. It's just little bits,
Something like that. You can't because you're yelling cut and it's like
you can't do it. You're not in it long enough to let it take you.
Now, since we're in DC, I have to ask you this. Now, after playing Frank Underwood in House of Cards, when you visit DC now, do you visit it differently? Do you see it differently after playing a character like that?
I find it so amusing.
So it's a different experience, though.
Well, no, I've always found politics amusing to a certain degree. I find it amusing that lots of people in Washington have embraced the series and the character. I find it amusing that many of them pretend like it's not really like this. That they say, oh, it's very cynical, and that of course it's a fictional version of our esteemed members of Congress, and it's a little bit disappointing to see that we send people to Washington and they don't do their jobs. It's frustrating to see, and that's why I think maybe the show's become so successful, because for an American audience, or maybe audiences around the world, it's actually amazing to watch a Congress that gets things done.
I have to ask you, because Sam Mendes is a brilliant filmmaker. Road to Perdition is an absolute masterpiece, and I love that film. But American Beauty was the best movie. I love that movie so much. You're wonderful in that movie. Talk about the difference in working with him as a filmmaker in American Beauty versus as an actor in a play.
That's a great question, because there is no difference.
At all?
At all. And I'll tell you why. Because even though American Beauty was Sam's first film, and I knew him as a theater director, and he knew me as a theater actor, he brought the best of theater to that experience. We rehearsed it like a play. We rehearsed it on a soundstage where they drew out all the lines of where the sets were going to be and where the furniture was going to be, and we rehearsed what would normally be a 6-week rehearsal process like that. He truncated into 2 weeks. His attitude, his approach, his understanding, his visual style, his perspective on how the human body against a set. I mean, the visual treat of that film, what he and Conrad Hall were able to create. I had seen him do that sort of thing in the theater for years. His extraordinary sense, and also his work with actors, his ability to describe to each member of a crew exactly what he needed and was going for. Everyone was able to come and do their best work. So it was no different than working with him on this play. He has the exact same approach. And it's the same argument I make about, people say, is there a difference between film acting and theater acting? And I go, no, there's just good acting and bad acting. I mean, really.
And one thing I love about this movie is watching how every person changed over the course of this 198 shows. They actually discovered things about themselves. I'm sure you did as well. I want to ask you, over all the movies you've done in your career, what's the role that taught you the most about yourself as a person and yourself as an actor?
Probably Beyond the Sea.
The film you directed.
Yeah.
Bob Hoskins.
Yeah, Bob Hoskins, rest in peace.
Yeah.
He was a wonderful, incredible man. I was very, very lucky to have known him and worked with him. And he was just a great, we used to laugh all the time, Bob.
Really? Pretty great gangster.
He did play a good gangster, too. Yeah, because I think in that circumstance, I had never directed a film on that scale. I had never directed myself in a film before. All of the asks, the ability to do all the work I had to do on that film, to do the singing, to do the dances, it was a sort of a gigantic, a lot of responsibilities, and I think I learned a great deal about what it's like to sort of have to oversee something. And I suspect I've also learned maybe an equal amount running the Old Vic Theater, because I'd never run a building before and run a company. So I've been lucky enough to be put in these positions where I have to learn to be a leader, and it's a big responsibility.
Now, I read an article with Kate Mara, who she said that when you guys did like the sex scenes in House of Cards, she would put pictures on her boobs of herself. Is that really true?
There were some photographs.
Is that really?
There's some little tiny photographs. But then I used to do things as well, but I can't really tell you
give me one.
what I made her look at.
Oh, give me one. Come on. I have to know.
I'll just put it to you this way. There were times when she would look at sometimes when you do a scene and you have to be really close to the lens.
Yeah.
And it's just, you can't, they want you to look closer to the lens than if you're looking, so they put a little X where you have to look, but the actor is just there, but you have to look there. So sometimes I would draw a little, images of certain parts of the anatomy that she had to look at while she was supposedly looking at me.
That's awesome. It's a great show. Last question about House of Cards. I'll get back to the play. But we are here in D.C. I have to ask about the Maryland things. I know they were having problems with shooting it the third season in Maryland.
They weren't. They really weren't. I
They
mean,
weren't.
There was a lot of newspaper articles and a lot of, the people like to make a big deal out of it. I never had any doubt that it was all going to work out. I knew it was all going to work out.
Could you shoot it somewhere else besides Maryland? Would the continuity work?
Look, of course, shows shoot all over the place. And one of the reasons that it's incredibly valuable for a state, and there's lots of states across the country who are doing fantastically in terms of tax rebates and offering productions to come there, is that it brings a tremendous amount of economy to the state that you're in. Otherwise, in the United States, we're going to lose all of the filming is going to go up to Vancouver, go up to Toronto, and go to other places around the world. I think it's incredibly important that states realize the value, the employment that not only the people that we employ, the numbers of people we employ, the amount of money we bring into a state, and all those people that come into the state that are working that have to live in hotels and buy food and go to the grocery store and have the dry cleaner, and there is a trickle-down effect. And I make this argument all the time about cultural institutions, too. It is incredibly important when you think about where theaters are located, where comedy clubs are, where jazz clubs are, where ballet companies are, opera companies. That means that people gather at those places to have an artistic and cultural experience. And that affects the economy of every one of the businesses that is around that center. These are incredibly valuable things to make arguments about economically. And that's the argument that I made when I went and met the legislatures, and I'm glad at the end of the day it all worked out.
Great answer. I have to ask you, because Sam Mendes is a brilliant filmmaker. Road to Perdition is an absolute masterpiece, and I love that film. But American Beauty.
I have auditioned for many things that I didn't get. I'll just tell you one. Remember the film Nixon?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful actor played that role, Frank Langella, who also did the performance in the theater. I not only auditioned, I screen tested. I made myself look like Nixon. Somewhere that audition is somewhere around, and I didn't get that part. And I'm just about over it now. So I'd say give him another maybe 7-8 years.
Did it really sting?
No, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that there have also been times when I've turned down roles that some other actor ended up doing and doing a wonderful job in. Yeah, I mean, it's probably been a while since I've lost out on a part that I really wanted to play. There was one role that Tom Hanks did in a film that was about a senator, Charlie. Yeah. Charlie, what was his name?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's a great film.
That was a role I thought was really great. But then he got that part, and he's still upset that he didn't get American Beauty. So